We have a very interesting mix of speakers. I myself, unlike what's mentioned in the program, I'm not speaking, I'm chairing, and I'd rather hear others than hear myself again. And all of you in Oxford know what I'm doing, but you don't know these three speakers, I think. So I would like to start with Khaled, Hroub, which is actually very interesting because one of the things that's been sort of lacking or missing in a lot of the reporting in the last few months is sort of a ground understanding of the politics and the political economy of the region, which resulted in thinking that the internet was sort of fell out of the sky and just helped the Egyptians and Tunisians to rise up. So Khaled will first start with giving a sort of general context of the Arab Muslim world or Middle East or however you choose to call it, and then zoom into the role of media and new media. Khaled, as I said, is, or I don't know if I mentioned it, is from Cambridge University, and he's heading a very interesting project and research group on media and new media, but he's also, for others, very well known about from his work on and his books on the first books, actually serious books on Hamas and social movement and political significance of Hamas in Palestine. Most of us read his book. So thank you for coming here. Khaled will speak about 15 to 20 minutes. Our second speaker will be George Weyman. He's a project manager at Medan. I'm sure you've all heard about some of the fascinating, creative forms of resistance during the revolutions that involved translating messages and tweets from within while the internet was cut off. And George was part of some of the projects involved in that, but also has been one of the founders of Medan that has been playing an enormously incredible, important role in translating news sources from Arabic to English rather than what we've known so far from English to other languages. So maybe George can tell us something about it. George knows Oxford very well. He's a graduate at the Middle East Institute here in Oxford, so we're happy to have you here. And then our last speaker is Noha Atef. Noha is an Egyptian journalist, and she was founder of the well-known website Torture in Egypt. I think Noha is the embodiment of that the internet is not a new phenomenon, but people have been using the internet for quite some, I think, brave things in Egypt for quite a while now, for a few years. I think Noha was the first person who came with quite graphic evidence of torture policies of the Egyptians and police, and which has led to, I think, a few very interesting cases of I think the judges that were involved and some political cases against the states thanks to her evidence. So she will talk about the role of the internet for Egyptian activists pre-Arab Revolution. So I will leave it at this and start with the speakers. But before doing so, one of the guests that I had invited, Anna Alexander from Cambridge University, can't make it today. She's a very interesting researcher writing about the role of the internet in Egypt, but she did send me a petition. She's just come back from Cairo. There was a protest at AUC, the Communication and Media.
And Cairo University.
Cairo University. There's been a sit-in and protest at the university, the communication faculty of people protesting against the head of department, who was a Mubarak appointed head, and there was a crackdown and they wanted to stop the union. So she sent me this petition asking if anyone's interested to know more about this case or shall sign the petition to do so. So I will leave that somewhere in the front. And then another message from Noha, who are organizing something at Birmingham University the 8th of April, and also exploring how social media drive change. So you can ask Noha more about this. Right. Khaled.
Thank you, Miriyam. Oops.
Do you have this?
Yeah. This is my screensaver. Thanks, Miriyam. Thanks, Nisreen, and thanks for everybody. Thanks for coming. For Anissa coming all the way through from Durham, kind of telling me that you see we come from Durham just to listen to all of you. So I hope that you wouldn't regret it. I will talk, my remarks are divided into two things. One is relating to the context of these Arab revolutions, the root causes maybe, and the main, what I call paradigm shift behind the happening of these revolutions. And the second set of remarks, again zooming in into the role of social media and maybe the media in general. My background actually is to do more with satellite media. I used to do a program for Al Jazeera for many years until 2006, 2007. And the project that I lead at Cambridge is interested in the satellite media and the impact of satellite media in our countries. Now we are having this new and very interesting phenomenon, that is the linkage between the satellite media and the social internet, basically, and how each of them is feeding into the other. So let me start with the first set of remarks. The first one is, I think we are witnessing, maybe I am either right or wrong, again, a paradigm shift in what's happening in the Arab world. By this, what I mean is, normally we, in Middle East politics and IR studies, when anybody wants to analyze what's happening in any of these Arab countries, maybe even beyond that, we would focus on the so-called major players. Major players, be them the regime, the government, the main political opposition, in the cases of Arab countries, the Islamist party or parties, and then the West, Western influence taking so many forms. And then you have the secular and leftist parties, normally described as the weak ones, and then the fragile, again, quote-unquote, civil society organizations. So we would zoom in and focus on these major players to either understand the situation or the daring ones amongst us to try to make any prediction. The most, I would say nowadays, retrospectively, the most ignored part was the so-called silent majorities. The silent majority is the main, if you like, the layman in the street. And people would think that the silent majority would follow one of these major players, either by voluntarily or by coercion or by any other policies. Now, the big surprise of these Arab revolutions is the following. That is, these revolutions, they came from this ignored corner, from the so-called silent majority. And our focus on the major players over the past 3, 4, maybe even 5 decades was somehow misled, because all the political, social mobility, activism, deep changes that have been taking place in that corner. And now everybody is surprised. So it's neither the regimes nor the Islamists or the West or any of these 3 or 4 major players being on the lead of these revolutions. They have been internally generated, not kind of externally imposed or influenced. So these are revolutions by the people's power. So this is my first remark. Now, within the silent majority, we have the main force, that is the youth. And the youth, they have surprised everybody with a number of things. Number one is they showed that they are highly educated, very well globally connected, politically driven, and yet not influenced by any ideology. So you have them politicized, but not kind of following any of your typical ideology. Even the Islamist ideology, which is maybe the most followed in the Arab countries, most of us, we have seen that they have been taken the second seat, not the driving one. So this is number one. Number two is this force is not really well organized, so it is decentralized in one way, but very well connected. It's horizontal, not vertical. You don't have a hierarchy as you have it in any party or organization or a movement. Then you have it kind of democratically, shall I say, elected or functioning within all these countries. And this is, of course, it's good and bad at the same time, because you need to have, at the end of the day, you need to have a hierarchy so that you can maximize the effectiveness of any social movement. Now this, the second maybe relating point to do with the context that I think we will be witnessing in the coming years is that this introduction, huge introduction, sharp introduction of the public opinion. The public opinion in the Arab world has been all the time over the past maybe 6 decades hijacked for so many reasons, and nobody would care about what the Arabs want or desire. And why is that? Because it's much easier to deal and to do business with dictators if you have people on the top who control the whole political process and they can do decisions and they can implement them. Then why to bother about having any democratically approved decision? So that was more or less the equation in the region. The Western powers and any other external powers, be them foreign or sometimes even local, it's much easier for them to do business with one man on the top. Now we have this equation completely broken. People and even the most authoritarian regimes in the region, even the ones that have been still intact in their countries, I think they will pay huge attention to the desires and the public opinion in their countries. And now we are witnessing this in Syria and Saudi Arabia and all these countries. So even in the countries where revolutions have not, say, succeeded, I think we have halfway success in pushing these regimes into a new direction. The other remark to do with the context is this, the huge actually regional realignments of power. Over the past, say, decade maybe, we had the so-called two competing sets of forces or powers, or the axis of moderates and the axis of resistance. The first one normally led by Saudi Arabia, Egypt, the Gulf countries, Jordan, maybe even Morocco kind of joining in certain ways. Then the axis of resistance with Syria and Iran on the lead, then followed by either non-state actors like Hamas, Hezbollah and others. So these kind of two alignments of power have dominated the whole scene. And now we have dramatic change in this formatting of power. Egypt being on the lead of the first axis is no longer there. And then Libya may be kind of moving in certain ways, and this is why the Gulf countries led by Saudi Arabia and Qatar, they just support Libya. So Libya is maybe, we will witness some shift in the Libyan position. So the whole thing is still in flux, of course. We can't predict, we can't make any final verdict. But at least a huge shift is happening in terms of regional power configuration. And then the last one, and just paying attention to time, is to do with the Israeli policies and Western policies. And I think both Israel and the West are somehow panicking at the time because of the big loss of Egypt. Egypt has been described by many Israeli high-ranking politicians used to be like the bulwark that would safeguard Israel against any other thing that would happen in the Arab world and beyond. Ben Ali Aza, who was minister of the Israeli government just a few months before the fall of Mubarak, said Mubarak is a strategic treasure to Israel, and this was on the record and widely quoted and widely circulated. So having that kind of treasure disappearing, I think, would change dramatically the whole Arab-Israeli relations. Now coming to the second set of remarks to do with the media itself, I think we need to be somehow cautious. Of course, there is no doubt that the media, be it social internet, the social internet media or the satellite media or even any form of the media, have played a crucial role in the whole Arab revolutions. But we need to bear in mind all the time that you have the revolution, any revolution, it does have its own causes. Because why the Iranian revolution back in 1979 took place in Iran and didn't take place in any other country? Because you have deeply rooted causes. And unless you have these causes, which would affect the people and drive them from their homes and to risk their lives and to sacrifice, you can't have a revolution. The internet or any other media or technology or tool is a tool. It's crucial, it's important, and yet this is the definition of the, I think, of the social internet and the media. It's the tool that helped greatly these revolutions to take place, but again, we have to put it in the right category. That is, this is the category of tools and techniques, and it's not the internet revolution. It's the people's revolution at the end of the day. And this is why I like this picture, having this, I put it on as a screensaver. So this is not the internet jumping on the policeman. It is some guy there. He is with blood and the flesh jumping on these policemen in Egypt, risking his life. So it's people's revolutions and not the internet revolution. The internet is again very crucial, but we have, I think, to be somehow modest in identifying and giving the significance and importance to the tool itself. Okay. And again, just to emphasize this point, if we go back to the Iranian Revolution at the time, they used the audio cassette. So at the time, the tool of the revolution was the audio cassette. So why, say, in any maybe other neighboring or non-neighboring country, we didn't have another revolution using the audio cassette? So it's not the presence or the lack of it, of this tool, that would make or not make the revolution. The audio cassettes were available in all these countries, but the deeply rooted causes, I think, they were more available in Iran than any other country. And the same applies nowadays in the Arab countries. You have the internet access, you have basically the same thing across the globe, and from China to Latin America to Africa, and we have so many, plenty of them, so many authoritarian regimes kind of polluting maybe the globe. And why these revolutions are happening now and then in this place or that place? Again, I think because we have right conditions behind these revolutions. One major thing that the social media that helped in the Arab world is these revolutions to take place is decreasing the cost of participating in these revolutions. So you can be part of it, you can be mobilized, you can participate in many forms, but the risk is not your typical risk as before. So it's not going in the street, getting shot, and the rest of it. Now you have different forms of participation. So this kind of space of maybe safety encouraged more people to get engaged in these revolutions. And most importantly for me is this breaking of the fear. So we have no longer this culture of fear engulfing these societies that we can do it. People can do it. And now they believe in this. They can do it, and they can go on the street under the most, if you like, brutal regimes in the countries. Not a single country, I think, is now exempted from one form or another of a protest, which means this fear, the cycle of fear has now disappeared. The other thing that I really would like to emphasize is what I mentioned, is this link between the social internet and the satellite media. For me, I have been arguing until maybe these revolutions that the whole internet access in the world has been somehow exaggerated, the influence of internet, because at the end of the day it's a very elitist kind of thing, again, being one of the people who would focus on major players and ignore more or less what's happening in that silent majority. I kept kind of arguing, saying, well, yes, of course you have the internet, you have the people who use it in many forms, and you have all the taboos in these Arabic websites. The websites have been broken. You have websites, and I wrote a chapter on this, on atheism in the Arab world, something beyond the imagination. One would imagine somebody is promoting atheism in the Arab world. So you have a website for the Arab atheists, then let alone the homosexual kind of organizations and gay, lesbian. So all these taboos have been broken. And yet, for me, they remain very limited and elitist. And I think I was mistaken again. And my point was all the time the significance and the leading importance of the satellite media. The satellite media goes to every single household. So then you have these dishes from Mauritania to Bahrain, and people just watch them. The average person. So you don't need to be highly educated. You don't need to be maybe well off to own a laptop. Housewives, grandmothers, they would sit and watch Al Jazeera, Al Arabiya, and the few hundred maybe satellite channels. And the argument was based on the following: that is, the illiteracy rates in the Arab world are really high, maybe in a scandalous way. In certain countries, they hit 40%. So if you have the illiteracy rates in Morocco, in Sudan, and Egypt, kind of hovering around 40%, then how would you expect the internet to be really very influential? So the satellite media, all these kind of TVs, for me had more power. Now I think that power is still there, of course. Now you have this marriage between the social internet and the satellite media. The satellite media being banned from sending their people on the ground to cover the Libyan or Tunisian or nowadays the Syrian affairs. They can receive this continuous feed from just mobile phones and Twitter and Facebook. And then they kind of, if you look at the news bulletin and the whole running order of the main, nowadays, in this very moment, of the main channels, the running order is filled by these feeds coming from amateurs, from even unknowns, people who are in the street. I think the rest of the points could be discussed, when we have open discussion. And thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Are you
Khaled.
using this one?
It's not crucial, actually.
No, I am just so that I can move.
Yeah, you feel free to. Thank you very much, Khaled. I'm absolutely humbled to be speaking here today alongside Khaled and Noha. I am a project manager for Midan. Midan was founded in 2005-2006 by Advice in San Francisco, California, registered, and designed to encourage collaborations between Arabic speakers and English speakers on the web in the post-9/11 world. So very much keyed into some of the things that Khaled has been saying, trying to encourage better knowledge exchange between different linguistics communities and collaborations using social media, and particularly translation. What I want to talk to you today is to pose a question. And that question is, why did the Mubarak regime turn the internet off? If we can think about that question, perhaps we can start to begin to answer the question as to the role of the internet and social media in these revolutions. And by posing that question, I want to position this within a long-standing debate, actually, about the way in which authoritarian regimes maintain their power. And a particular influence on me is the work of Lisa Wadeen, who I strongly recommend you have a look at. And this debate has covered a lot of ground, from media studies to the anthropology of the cult of personality and many other things, and looking at what regimes say and how they deploy their resources. And in answering this question, why did the Mubarak regime turn the internet off? I think we have to say, we have to make a very, very important caveat, which is, as Khaled says, revolutions depend on lots of things coming together. And in particular, lots of people who have economic grievances who don't have access to these kinds of tools, and lots of people who are willing to die, actually. And to them, I am humbled. As somebody who I doubt will ever have to put my life on the line, I'm absolutely humbled to think of what the Egyptian people have managed to achieve. The fact that the Mubarak regime turned the internet off, I think, points to the impact of social media. And that is a long-term impact. And it's not so much, I think, because Mubarak and his regime felt they had to stop activists organising. No doubt that's a really important aspect of social media, and there's a lot of research into that. But for me, it's interesting from the point of view in which authoritarian regimes think about social media as something which fundamentally undermines them in some way. So this is a long-term debate about the way in which authoritarian regimes actually try to atomize people, to break down society, to stop people in their private space from organising together, and that social media offer one route for particularly well-connected, well-educated people with access to those tools to actually break down that atomization and render many of the tools of authoritarian regimes redundant and ineffective, with the exception of obviously mass slaughter, which is what the Gaddafi regime has resorted to. In Egypt, Mubarak refused, or at least the army refused, to kill people, and that was all the revolution needed, because it had everything else covered. Now, there are three aspects to this. Freedom of assembly, the cult of personality, or what you might call as regime propaganda, and freedom of expression. Those are the three areas I'm interested in. Freedom of assembly, regime propaganda, and freedom of expression. Let's take each one. And I'll just offer some observations. Freedom of assembly, first of all. We think about, what happened in Tunisia. It started actually outside the capital. We think about Egypt. In the early part of the revolution, Suez was really important. We think about what's going on in Syria right now. Dir'a or Latakia. They're not they're not capital cities, but it really did need for there to be a big gathering of people, big protests in the capital city. There needed to be not just in the capital city, but in one location within that capital city, Tahrir, Midan al-Tahrir, Tahrir Square, and that provided that central gathering space. Now, I actually felt when the fighting began, the kind of thugs went into Tahrir Square, I actually felt, this is awful. And all of a sudden, they're going to portray this as, the pro-regime supporters over here and the anti-regime supporters over there. In actual fact, Tahrir Square was liberated space. It was a proto-democracy, even before Mubarak had gone. And as a gathering space, in many ways, what social media did was imitate that and provide spaces for gathering spaces. Places where you could assemble. So we think about Facebook pages, and it's really important to emphasize that the vast majority of Egyptian social media users are using Facebook and not probably Twitter. But my experience is much more of Twitter. But Kulina Khaled Said, a very important Facebook page. The April the 6th youth movement, which came on the back of worker protests in a place called Mahalla. Or even the Facebook page which I have up here, يناير يوم الثورة على تعذيب والفقر والفساد والبطالة. Revolution Day against torture, poverty, corruption and unemployment. And on Twitter you had the Jan25 hashtag. Now, why a date? What is the importance of a date in all of this? Why isn't that something rather clinical? You know, I have a birthday. It's a date. Does it matter to anybody here? January 25 was a day of rupture, and modern nation states need to come from, they need to be born. And January 25th was the day of rebirth, in which the nation of Egypt rose again. And the day of Mubarak's departure was actually less significant than January 25th, as the hashtag attests. The hashtag persists, Jan 25th. That is the day in which the Egyptian nation came together and said enough is enough. And you think about a very interesting connection here between Meydan al-Tahrir and the date, Jan 25th. Many Egyptian, in Cairo, many streets are named after important dates, and perhaps Noha can explain some of them. Kubri 6 October, or Kubri 15 Mayo. Lots of streets and important public places have names after pivotal dates in the national history. Jan 25 was a pivotal date. Did the regime decide on that date? No, it didn't. The community did. The community decided on that date. It was fundamentally a social action. And when we try to understand, where does this come from? We like to have the sense that a central actor decided something. But actually this was a community thing, necessarily so. A Twitter hashtag depends on lots of people using it. I remember when I was a kid going to watch football matches with my dad, and 1 minute the people in the crowd would be talking to each other, the next minute everybody would be singing with one voice. Where did it come from, I'd say to him? Who started it? It's the community. And it's a fundamental threat to the atomization of society that regimes, authoritarian regimes try to propagate. The second point, regime propaganda. What do regimes put out there? How do they try to break up public space and dominate public space? I think when we think about Twitter particularly, we think about many of the features of Web 2.0 coming together into that tool, because it, better than perhaps any tool I know of, allows you to create very quickly a dense web of information and people. Users are links. Topics, i.e. hashtags, are links. Replies are links. People share and trade URLs are links. You create this incredible web of information, which really, encourages both dissemination of information, but also the network. And that networked web of linkages and people is, again, a major threat to the regime's ability to dominate public space with its own propaganda. And the old media paradigm of radio, TV, of even print, of one to many, authoritarian regimes flourished in that environment. And we might be veering a little bit towards a utopia in making this case, but we actually have some very concrete examples of the way in which social media broke down that propaganda, the cult of personality that authoritarian regimes depend on. Think about Vodafone text messages. I have an example here. Perhaps, hang on, where is it? I have an example here. This is a Vodafone text message, and perhaps one of our Arabic speakers could read it and translate it for us. The Egyptian regime was trying to use Vodafone to send text messages to influence people. It was trying to insert itself into social media and failed. Mubarak went on TV and made speeches, and it wasn't ever really what he said. Let's be honest, I bet Egyptians, the vast majority of them, for a long, long time, had totally ignored the content of what he was saying. What was powerful was the fact that he could say it. That was the act of power, the act of dictating.
Can you say what it said?
Oh, yeah, please go ahead.
I don't have my glasses.
Yes, I have.
You want to read it?
Young people of Egypt, don't follow rumors. Listen to the voice of mind. Egypt is above all, so keep it contained.
Thank you.
Protected. Yeah, this is a message from the regime itself.
Yes. There is another really good example. Al-Ahram, the state newspaper in Egypt, on the day in which Mubarak fled, published this really, I would love to have it here for you, but this really fascinating front page. And it was an existential crisis for Al-Ahram, which for so long had not been about reporting the news. It had been about control. And I have another example of this, which is actually, if I have time to briefly explain this. Here is a paparazzi magazine in Lebanon called Star Magazine. I did some research on how the Syrians got hold of this paparazzi magazine and turned it into a Syrian magazine. And in fact, it depended on a group of young people. They hired a group of young amateur journalists, they called them, to write articles about, how to be a good Syrian, how to be a good modern, educated employee in the workforce. And when the Syrian regime came under a lot of threat because of the UN tribunal into the murder of Rafik al-Hariri, of course, this kind of modernized form of media tried to propagate the regime message. And so you're seeing here the front page, and it actually gave out CDs, it gave out little wristbands saying, you have to toe the government line. It was a kind of a very neoliberal way of dominating, of trying to control public space. Now, even this fails in the context of social media. One third thing that I want to say before briefly wrapping up, freedom of speech. And here I'm interested in the way in which we can do critique and critique things. Here you have a picture of a blogger who I spent a lot of time with in Egypt in 2006, 2007, who wrote a blog called Two Pairs of Eyes with a friend, both of them female. They blogged anonymously, and they didn't blog about politics, but they did blog about politics in a very fundamental way. They blogged about their family. They blogged about why they hated the fact that their dad told them what to do. They hated the fact that they were not able to live on their own. They hated the fact that they were expected to toe the line and have children aged 25. Sure, a certain agenda they had, that's their agenda. My point is that they were able to say what they thought. They were able to propagate their critique anonymously and with a very local focus, perhaps, and a little network of consensus bloggers, their peers, gathered around their blog, and they were able to take on bloggers that came along from other viewpoints and actually propagate their critique. And the point is, with social media, we have an opportunity to create a rewrite mechanism that allows us better to say what we think. And over a long period of time, allows for more of this kind of critique than I think old media did. Now, my conclusion really is to say, again, with all the caveats about the inequalities of social media, and all the concerns that I have about social media, about the fact that social media may encourage us to be more concerned about status competition, that may be, privacy questions, about linguistic hegemony, about lots of very important issues. Nevertheless, and of course, there is no simple formula. We cannot boil this down to social media plus young people equals revolution. But the long arc of impact is to say, over a period of many years, the more networked, editable, community-led public sphere is surely something we should celebrate in creating the potential for more accountable forms of governance. Thank you.
Thank you. Stand or sit? Stay with it.
Hello all. So I'm going to talk about the role of the internet in the Egyptian revolution. The internet has to do with the revolution in 3 stages: before, over, and after. But I'm more going to focus on the before stage. First, I'd like just to remind you that nothing happens all of a sudden. I think this is a rule. And also, the revolution, if you are saying Egyptian revolution, we should not mean the period between 25th of January to 11th of February, because the revolutions are not events. Revolutions are a state. So the revolution didn't start in Egypt. The revolution didn't start in 25th of January. and it didn't end yet, still on. The millions of people who took to streets and chanted, "We want this regime down," were not to do this unless someone said, "Down, down with Mubarak," in early 2000, in the year 2000. And this one who chanted, "Down, down with Mubarak," for the first time in the history of the country, that you stand against the president. He was not to do this unless someone else in 90s said, "I'm against this minister because of corruption." And this one was not to say it unless someone in 80s said, he was bold enough to say, there is corruption, and this one was not to say, "I'm against corruption," until someone revealed the corruption. So it's endless state. Before 25th of January, let's have a look at the figures of internet users in Egypt. These figures are according to the state of 2010. The latest estimation to the number of Egyptian population is 77 million, and the highest estimation is 85 millions. Unfortunately, we don't have fresh official census. Then 21 millions of Egyptians are online, and this is the biggest number in the Arab world. They spend the average of 900 minutes every month, and 4.5 millions of them are on Facebook, while only 26,800 are Twitter users. Like Khaled said, the number of illiterate people are a scandal in the Arab world. So yes, in Egypt, for example, we have 17 millions who cannot read or write. However, they know what internet is. Because as you can see, like in this picture, internet cafes are literally everywhere. Even if the poor areas, even if the villages, there are internet everywhere. And the interesting thing is that people who cannot access to the internet, who are uneducated, they regard the internet they think the internet is Aladdin lantern. So whatever they want to know, do they ask their son, someone they know, just find it, you will find it online. And they don't know even what the internet is, but they know that there's computers and the internet can do everything. There's something, a ghost in the internet. And this actually reflects the way how Egyptians look to the virtual world. Actually, the internet mirrors the real world, because the users of the internet are people who are living our real life. But it's like the internet mirrors our lives in a brighter way. It makes it the way we want it. Like you look on the ground, and then you find some things you lack. You try to fulfill it online. What you want to have offline, you create it online. So, like George and Khaled mentioned, like the example of the two female bloggers, they complain about something they have in their real life. They create a blog and they write it online. If they have some people, some groups who cannot speak offline, they just go online and do and write and listen and whatever. So the internet was a space that you are informed and you inform people with the great advantage that you can remain anonymous online and you have free tools. And the internet is becoming more social, so it's really a society, it's really a country, a new country you are building. So as I mentioned, the internet was a space to inform people. And from actually this point, I started blogging. As Miriyam told you, I have been blogging in a website called tortureinegypt.net since late 2006. Personally, I had some engagement with human rights, and I know that torture had been practiced systematically by the Egyptian police. But unfortunately, it was not mentioned enough in mainstream media, and like most of people doesn't know about it. And even if you tell someone, it's this is restricted to political detainees. Oh, yeah, Egypt had torture, but this is not. That was that how people were talking about torture in 2006, 2007. So I started this website, tortureinegypt.net. So in Torture in Egypt, you would find everything about torture. I'm trying to make it a hub for everything about torture. You found news, articles, reports, the local and the reports issued by local and international organizations, testimonies of torture victims, announcements for events. This search engine is only for human rights, so it just looks in human rights websites only videos. It means YouTube videos for like interviews with torture victims or mobile leaks, so it's different things. I even have some audio files. These are songs, and all related to prison torture, these awful topics, and games. Of course, I'm not developing this game myself. This was by Amnesty International, so I just talk the game. I even have some jokes, but in Arabic, about torture. Then people started to know. Like I started at late 2006, and like by 2008, people started to know that torture exists and there are crimes going on. So what was next? The next step was to document these crimes and to archive it, because the internet is just like it's a free space. Oh, well, it's not 100% free, but it's very cheap space, and you can put something in a window, and everyone's looking to this window, like a window shop or something. So everyone is looking to what you have been storing, and it's stored forever, and everyone can access it. So I started to build a database of torture crimes. So in Torture in Egypt, you can browse the torture crimes committed in Egypt since 2000. Browse it by governorate, by province. So you know, like in Cairo, which are crimes, which you can have a look at the crimes committed in Cairo, in Alexandria, or you can browse it by police station. So if a specific police station, like Asrani police station, like anything police station, if you look to Torture in Egypt, you will have a list of all torture crimes committed in it. Also by police officer name. So if you Googled a police officer who committed a torture crime, you would go to his page on Torture in Egypt and see which crime did he commit. And by torture technique, like by electricity and something. One of my friends actually, he made this interactive map, which is a visualization of this database. So if you go to any province and click it, you will go to its page on Torture in Egypt. This is something called Torturepedia. I called it Torturepedia, like to Wikipedia or something. So this list are names of police officers. If you click one of them, you go to, like if you click Muhammad Salah, you go to his page. You find his picture if available. Otherwise, you find a symbolic picture and a list of his torture crime with hyperlinks. So you can read the testimonies of the victims he tortured. You can read where you can find when and in which police station he tortured them. We even have an interesting thing, like we start to look. Egyptians, the Egyptians were more engaged with social media and started using more social networks. So this is Flickr. This is the Flickr group. Usually when we started using Flickr, it was for like first day pictures, holiday pictures, something like this, if you are a mature and using it. But then we find the activists or a number of, like this is me and my friend Hussein, Amr, and Asad. So what happens that in protests we find, of course, a huge number of police officers, and they are like looking, watching, beating people, and even taking pictures of us. And in some big protests, they are filming the protest. So we were picturing them back. We were taking photos of them. So my suggestion was, I suggested this time. So if I have some police pictures, and you do have some police pictures, why don't we make them available to people? So let's say I was in a protest and I was beaten up. I could not sue the police officer because I don't even know his name, and I cannot recognize him because I don't have a picture of him. But if I do have a picture, I would recognize him. I would find who is this man, and then start to take a legal action against him. So we made this. We made this photo album for police officers. All those people are police officers in plain clothes or in uniforms. This is not only us who are uploading it, but we invited people. If you have any picture with any quality to our police officer, please upload it to this, share it with us. And it would be perfect if you write the name, if you know his name, or where this picture was taken, or any information do you have. So far we have 448 items and 173 members. And because everybody was going to write about torture, and the content is spreading, torture in Egypt, the subject of torture in Egypt, has more content, even more than torture in Iraq. Then was the next. Stages to mobilize people using the internet. Sorry to show this picture, but this man, who is exactly, you would recognize him, Khaled Said, who was 28 years old, and he was beaten to death on the street in Alexandria. And this picture was circulated on Facebook. And then we have Facebook started to be used. Another social networks like blogs and Flickr. Facebook was used to mobilize people. This group that we all are, Khaled Said, the English group, had 106,000 fans. The Arab group has more than 1 million fans. Since we have no time, I wish to show you how to show you the protest. One of the protests against the kill of Khaled Said. No time.
مش مشكلة.
Yeah, let's see. Okay. Of course, me as a social media researcher, I'm not very happy to show something by CNN, but it's in English.
More than 1,000 people showed up in Alexandria today to participate in a demonstration against police brutality and torture in Egypt. Now, this demonstration is just the latest in a series of protests sparked by the killing earlier this month of 29-year-old Alexandrian businessman Khaled Said. Now, the exact circumstances behind his death are unclear. The Egyptian government, the Ministry of the Interior, the police insist that he died as a result of swallowing a bag of drugs and suffocated. However, a picture that was leaked out of the morgue clearly shows that he died from a beating, a brutal beating. And this is what sparked this demonstration. Now, what made this demonstration different was the presence of Mohammed Baradei, the Nobel Peace Prize winner, the former head of the International Atomic Energy Agency, who is increasingly a figurehead in the Egyptian opposition, calling for an end to the 29-year-old regime of Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak. Now, also what made this demonstration different was probably as a result of the presence of Mohammed Baradei, is that there was little police brutality for once. Nobody was beaten, nobody was arrested, and the demonstration ended for once peacefully. I'm Ben Wiedemann, CNN, reporting from Alexandria, Egypt.
So I meant to show you like how people were participating in Khaled Said solidarity actions. Actually, it was the first time ever to see people from different ages taking to streets to demonstrate against torture. And as you see, as you listen to him, the police claimed that he was not beaten to death or something. He just swallowed drugs. So he died was asphyxia or something. That was another thing the internet did, that it stand against these lies, this media propaganda and fabrications and things. And everyone was convinced that, like, no, he's not. He's a victim. He's not a bad person. And even if he was drug dealer or something, he should not be treated like this. And there was actually a big shift in the human rights culture in Egypt, and that all started. I'm not going to say this started from the internet, but like using internet in the end of the day is a tool, is one of the tools. It is a media. It's like video. It's like cassette tapes in the Iranian Revolution. It's like the graffiti even before. Like the TV. It's a tool, and if you use your tool well, you of course will speed up the result you are seeking. One of the last thing I'm going to highlight and fundamental thing is the internet actually provoked people's anger. I'm not saying internet created this anger. I'm not saying internet made people angry, because people already were angry because this anger could be felt in their everyday life. But internet turned this unsatisfaction into anger. So they were ready to take the street. They were ready to rebel. Of course, as I told you, the revolution didn't start in 25th of January. There were lots of many revolutions, let's say. So in only 1 year, from between April 2009 and May 2010, 169 sit-ins all over the country, not only in the poor areas or in the capital. 112 strikes, 87 demonstrations, and 63 protest marches. And as you can see in the picture, it was like different generations, men and women. And actually seeing this online, like if I read now, there are a protest in London. Out here, I imagine, okay, there are protests in London. If I read it in the newspaper, I might think, oh yeah, it's a protest, it's a big protest. But if I'm seeing it, if I'm watching it on YouTube, I'll see more detail. I will see how many people are attending, what people are chanting, what they see. Do they sound like they are really striking or something, or is it when they protest what's going on? And if you see, like if I hear people of my job are striking somewhere in the country, and I'm watching them, and I find like they are making this small victory or something, this even stimulates me to do the same. So it was not at all strange that you find these strikes and protests going all over the country. And here come the Egyptian revolution. And then I was listening to these fantastic statements, like it's a Facebook revolution, which so far, like I have been working in mainstream media for, not for a very long, but like for 5 years. And I haven't yet understand what does it mean, Facebook revolution. And then people were saying, journalists were saying, Facebook changed the regime. Oh wow. Facebook has led a revolution. Yesterday, Washington Post came with a very sad news, is that the Facebook revolution in Egypt has an identity crisis. Like middle-age crisis. So far, I don't understand what these statements mean. And actually, for me, it's kind of insulting to everyone talked the street and lost his eye, or everyone lost even his life. Everyone just spent a number of days sleeping in the street and just in danger. Everyone watched F-16 flying over him, or were lying to a tank in the square. Another thing, George touched, which is the internet turn off or the internet shutdown. It was not the first time, actually, to have this internet crackdown in Egypt, because, as Miriyam said, we lucky and proud that we have lots of young people who are courageous enough to write, to use citizen media to resist corruption and resist crime everywhere. We also have a crackdown from the part of the regime. I'm not sure, but I think in 2003, like in after 2000, the year 2000, Ministry of Interior established an administrative unit to watch the internet, what we call internet police. Its official name is like the Unit for Internet Crimes. So this unit was watching the cyber activists, and Egypt actually has a good record of internet crackdown. So in the year 2009, it was the worst, one of the worst countries to be a blogger. And in the same year, it was more than 100 bloggers and cyber dissidents were imprisoned. In 2006, 2010, 2011, Egypt was one of the internet enemies. This is the last slide, actually, how this is after the revolution. The figures are March 2011, so this month. We were 58 million. We are 58 million Egyptians. The internet subscription were 21,000. Now they are 23. So just 2 million. Instead of spending 900 minutes per month online, we are spending 1,800 minutes. So it's double. The number of Facebook users also raised. But now we are 5 million. And Twitter. That's all. Thank you.